Hello, and welcome to the Rethink Retail webinar. We're going to be talking about AI, speed, and the future of retail experience delivery. I'm your host, Trevor Sumner. I'm the CEO of Reimagining, which is a consumer insights AI platform synthesizing consumer insights without surveys by synthesizing billions of data points from social, from search, from reviews, from new product launches. I'm a top retail expert with Rethink Retail, occasional angel investor, advisor, and general rabble-rouser. So I'm excited to have on our webinar today John Murdock, who's the CEO of Fastr, which is an AI-native DXP and CRO built for enterprise retailers. But rather than have me introduce you, how about you introduce yourself, John? Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Trevor, great to see you again. Thanks for having me. So as you mentioned, Fastr, we're in the AI native digital experience space. We work with some of the largest brands and retailers in the industry, many of which you know. I've spent the last 25 years in the tech ecosystem, and like you, kind of came into the industry rather when the internet was born, saw that revolution, saw mobile, saw cloud. And now you and I are both experiencing with the world AI. And I can say from my experience, this is the biggest platform shift that I've seen. And it's going to fundamentally change everything.
Awesome. Well, when you say AI-driven digital experience optimization, what does that mean?
Yeah, so think about what AI is doing now, right? AI is really helping to augment humans to help brands and retailers just get more work done, right? Move faster, create more content, run more experiments, test new markets, test new pricing and packaging and merchandising strategies. And it's really kind of giving superpowers to marketing, to commerce, to merchandisers. And as an agentic help, as a co-pilot, and even underneath the surface with our platform, really helping to do the work. If you think about deploying a digital experience, if you think about optimizing a digital experience and optimizing that interaction, there's certainly code beneath the surface that needs to previously get written or developed, and now AI is really kind of helping to kind of augment that layer, moving marketers and merchandisers into the strategy layer and into that, what is the next experiment we can run? What's the next optimization we can seek? And it really kind of has been taking, a lot of the heavy lifting off of their plates.
Gotcha. And so is your focus on the e-commerce site, the other digital touch points?
Yeah, great question.
Where is your focus?
We support both e-commerce brands, so those that actually transact online, but we do work with a lot of considered purchases. Think about home and furnishings, and where customers and shoppers are going to do a lot of online kind of discovery around that brand, around those products, and then maybe the purchase occurs in the store, right? So Omnichannel. And so supporting that digital experience, whether the transaction's done online through e-commerce or it's done through another channel.
Got it. So, there's been an explosion of different digital touch points, a change from the notion of kind of funnel for, the strict funnel of the past to this kind of more general way of influencing the shopper. Maybe you could talk about what's changed most dramatically in how shoppers move from inspiration to purchase, and why you often mention experience speed. So I'd love to understand, why that focus on experience speed matters as much as experience quality these days.
So we're all experiencing this, as well. So we're all consumers and shoppers. And so if you look at the journey, the journey is really, collapsing, right? How we search for products and considered purchases, discovery is changing, search is changing, AI is here. There's a variety of different LLM, chat interfaces and tools that you can go to. Expectations for content are changing. There's a lot happening in kind of the social world, so that digital landscape, that digital footprint in terms of how you interact with consumers, it's really kind of collapsing, and the lines continue to kind of blur. And I think retailers and brands continue to look for ways to engage their shoppers and consumers throughout every part of that journey, as it's starting to collapse, or it's the lines are starting to blur to your point, it used to be very predictable in terms of, how you could, kind of set up your funnels and fund your funnels. And now things, things have really changed, and it's obviously being led by this AI, revolution. And, and often today, the slowest part of your digital experience in commerce, it's no longer the site. It's no longer, site performance and speed. It's actually the internal decision making and handoffs and processes that have been built inside a company. So that's really where there's a lot of innovation coming. Is how can you go faster? How can you experiment more? How can you get more done, and simplify your business?
Yeah, and I think that's a controversial statement that experience speed matters more than experience quality. Can you explain that a little bit more?
It's not or. So you need to move fast. You need to have speed and agility in your organization. You also need to maintain quality, right? That experience and your product, if you will, in terms of what you deliver to the world, needs to be high quality. And so you want to have both. Often that's not the case, depending on the brand or retailer, but the brands and companies and enterprises that we work with, are really focused on delivering both. And that's really where you're going to get, the most lift of an organization is continue to deliver high quality, but find ways to do it, and increase speed and agility in your organization.
Yeah, I talk to my teams a lot about, I care less about whether we're here or here, right? But I care much more about what's the slope of the line of how we're changing, because that determines our long-term success. And, the theory of evolution, not to get all Darwinian, is not that the strongest survive. It's actually the fastest adapting survive. So, I think that's very relevant here. I talked to some people who are like, oh, our budgets are already allocated for the next year in consumer insights. It's like, what? Do you think Amazon doesn't change their budget allocation, quarter to quarter? So maybe you could talk to me a little bit or talk to us, but why are so many digital teams still struggling to keep pace, to push that experience speed, despite the fact that there have been years of investment in e-commerce and CX tools?
Well, I'll first say that, we're coming out of a decade of the cloud revolution, right? So the last 10, 15 years, depending on where you want to draw the line, many brands and retailers have moved to e-commerce, have modernized and transformed and built out technology and technology stacks. And if you really step back and you look at that, many companies, and it's not just retailers and brands or e-commerce, you can look across a variety of industries, have kind of over purchased technologies and over complicated and over rotated on, a variety of different, kind of point solutions. So what does that mean? That means that there's complexity in the business. Things have become complicated to maintain and for work to get done. And now we're moving into an era where, the work is changing. We have new tools and new approaches and new architectures are required in terms of, how you build a business. So, most e-commerce and digital investments, over the last, decade, they've really been optimized for capabilities, and that led to all these different point solutions that you would have on your website. And then you have IT and developers that need to, that need to, build it all together. And so capabilities kind of out prioritized, if you will, velocity and agility inside of the enterprise. So we meet with many, chief digital officers, heads of merchandising, heads of marketing, who are just handcuffed by their IT and their development teams who have built out these complex, infrastructures. And what they're looking for is they're looking to move faster, take control, run more campaigns, run more experiments. But the infrastructure that they have, and kind of the tech that they have has really kind of complicated things. And so, so I think the first thing is we're just moving into a new era where there's new expectations on what you can do. And luckily, I think most digital and e-commerce and brands, on the revenue side, the marketing side, commerce side, are thinking about, hey, how do we innovate? How can we move from where we are to a much more agile place. And an interesting antidote of what does this actually mean if you can move faster, experiment more, and get more work done. We work with a a customer called RM Williams. They're a very well-known Australian brand. They make these beautiful boots and clothing. Beautiful company, great, great organization. And so they've been a customer of ours for several years. They were able to move from their current developer-centric process to a much more agile process with Fastr to launch experiments 3 times faster. So we were able to get their experimentation engine in terms of how many experiments they could run and deploy up by 3x. And what that did for them is they were able to increase conversion rates by 15%, which is a very meaningful increase if you think about a large brand and trying to run experiments to drive to drive more revenue. That was a very large outcome for them. So speed does translate when done well, to your point on quality, as well as speed. It does translate to revenue, and you just have to take the shots, and you have to lean in on things that help your team build the agility.
Yeah, I'm sure any retailer would be very happy with 15% increase in conversion rates, and increasingly that requires a deeper understanding of the entire journey. Not just there's a lot of focus on lower funnel optimization and just that final outcome, but the reality is that AI can synthesize data from various different signals throughout the journey, create more meaningful experimentation. I think part of that means like a mindset shift. In thinking how retailers approach that type of experience optimization and delivery. Can you talk a little bit about, there's this notion that like, hey, let's launch something and optimize it later. And sometimes often, those resources get moved and you never get to optimize later. But how do you go from that kind of launch and optimize later to a continuous real-time experience delivery? And how does AI help you do that?
You have to rethink the whole org structure. You have to, rethink your process. Today, most companies are very kind of fragmented in terms of teams having different responsibilities, not just like channel, but also just kind of functional. And so there ends up being a lot of handoffs, a lot of processes, and that just stalls out. So you really have to step back and really rethink. How do we experiment, right? And start from a fresh perspective, and then figure out how do we get to that end goal, and it ends up being a different workflow. It ends up being kind of different decision loops, and in the case of ownership, like who owns that digital experience, that asset, and who can contribute. So it really is kind of a rethink moment. That doesn't mean it needs to take 3 months to to redesign it. It just means rethink a particular experiment that you want to run. Go test, go trial, go try new things. And through that find new ways to get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. That fragmentation is near and dear to my heart. We work with a lot of brands where they have a group that's focused on the social data set and a totally separate group that is focused on reviews or search. But if you're really trying to understand the consumer and where to optimize your marketing, your impact, you really need kind of the nexus of all three, because a marketing campaign can affect obviously what people say on social media. It can affect what they search for, which products they search for based upon your focus, based upon the features, and also kind of what is the post purchase CX, which is the reviews and how the reviews influence the next consumer to buy. So that fragmentation, I think, is seen all over. I think there's a cultural challenge and that is inherent to AI being able to process so many different signals, to weight them differently for the different use cases. What are some of the challenges that you've seen adopting AI for experience delivery in those fragmented environments? Are there organizations that are better suited to adopt this type of continuous real-time experience delivery through AI, and others that struggle because of those silos? What needs to happen to be successful?
I think for AI to be successful, it absolutely has to start at the top, right? I think there's a lot of companies out there, doing bottoms-up experimentation, and that's good too, right? You do want, you do want to go, experiment in silos, but at the top of the organization, it needs to be driven with a strategy to lean into this moment with AI, to find ways to drive that down, through the organization. in clear, measurable, kind of objective ways, and empower folks to to go get done. And as they do that, as you go tops down, you start to find that it becomes, these two teams need to collaborate to get something done, or these three teams need to work together to get that thing done. And so I think, as we work with executives, and you and I both run businesses too, so we can relate, it has to start at the top in terms of the priority and the urgency that this moment brings to find ways to transform your business. And then as you get down to that transformation layer and objectives, it actually does become that you have to actually start to rethink collaboration. You have to kind of rethink who owns getting something done, because the traditional organization that's been set up, over the last, 10 years may not be set up properly for this moment. So you have to start at the top, you have to get down there, and you have to really kind of instill that collaboration. And then as you get down to the deeper layer, fragmentation of tools, fragmentation of data, it doesn't always clearly show up on the dashboards, but it will as you start to look across these collaboration opportunities, right? So, and typically you're going to find as you get down that you do have siloed, and you probably have competing tools and competing organizations with budget, working the same problem, when they should really kind of come together to solve that. And I would just encourage every leader, just like you and I, every handoff, introduces a delay, right? Every process step. So question is that process driving quality? Is that process driving, us, our objectives, properly? And you're probably going to find there's a lot of rethinking to be done. But I wouldn't start with a complete reorg and a complete overhaul of the org structure. I would start by starting to test and experiment and start to prove out the value in some very concrete places.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think there's been this promise of reinventing everything at the top level, a giant platform, and you've got IT teams saying, oh, we can build anything now with Cursor or Copilot, and so we should build a big data lake, we should manage it ourselves, we should build our own CRM. And the reality is that some of these tools are great at getting you 80% of the way there, but that last 20% is actually really, really important. And so focusing on achievable applications with real ROI, I think, is key. In terms of the promises of AI, you hear these quotes from Satya Nadella and others saying it'll be bigger than electricity, even, right, or bigger than the Industrial Revolution. Where are we? Where does AI genuinely add value today in retail experience delivery? Where's the hype still outpacing reality?
We're both leading companies too, where we're experiencing this not only internally but also in our product development. I would say that it's absolutely going to change everything. We are early, and I'm sure you would agree with that, but there's real tangible value that can be gained. So I don't think this is a moment where you want to sit back and then wait for every single surface area to mature as an organization, because this is a moment where startups can really be disruptive to the incumbents, and so you don't want to be a late mover at a moment like this. And so it is early, but there are tangible things that that and value that can get done. So you have to lean in, you have to find ways to test, trial, experiment, and and find the edges of what's possible. I would say from just our own internal kind of product development, the leverage that we're getting, the ability for us to really move faster than our incumbents is very impressive. And I think that's where it gets to, if you have so much bureaucracy in terms of work getting done, and you have so much process, and you're a large, vendor or retailer or brand, pick a category, you are going to get disrupted, and this is a moment where that will happen, but it is early, and so I think in terms of tangible to take it back to retailers and brands and the customers that we serve, AI is definitely wholeheartedly removing steps in your workflow. So where in the past you needed to have someone who would design a concept in Figma and hand that off to a developer to code, who then hands that off to a QA person, who then hands that off to a site performance and optimization person, and so on, SEO and ADA compliance, and a whole bunch of workflows. If you think about all of that is now compressing in the workflow, and the process looks very different, and technology aided with by AI can really help kind of streamline that. So it's absolutely in my opinion removing steps, changing processes and workflow, and there's real leverage in that. I think back to the earlier point, I think the teams that move now and start to find ways to apply this and gain value are the ones that are going to win in 5 years.
Gotcha. So, I want to dig down a little further. Like where do you think there's a lot of hype that's outpacing reality? So for example, in consumer insights, we have a variety of people who say, can you look at all the TikTok videos and understand the objects in the video? And it's like, yes, you can, but the cost of it is going to be so high, you're not going to pay it. Or, I've had a client say, we're going to take all this functionality and build it in-house in our own data lake. And I was like, are you really going to optimize, these predictive algorithms that, the amount of data science, do you have that team in place? And they're like, well, no, but we think we can do it. Our IT team says we can do it. And I'm like, you'll be back in 6 months. And sure enough, they actually called last month. Are there things that you hear where you're like, yeah, you don't want to do that? Like, I know you think you can do that because everybody's telling you AI can do that, but you don't want to do that. And conversely, are there low-hanging fruits that you're like, yes, AI should help you write requirements. AI should help you with the Figma designs. Like, where is there? That's you can't really do that. And clients ask you for it because clients do that because they're shooting for the moon. And where is it like low hanging fruit that you're like?
And I'd love your answer on this too, but I can go first. I think this is a really really interesting question that gets to kind of the heart of it. I think we're at a moment where yes, AI can create prototypes and content and landing pages. AI can even take your product catalog and assemble it, generatively into, a scene. It can put your clothes on, on models. It can do a lot of things, generatively, and I think humans notice, right? So remember who we're trying to communicate to. We're trying to communicate to, to others. So we're definitely at a moment where you could use generative to go deep and just remove your humans in the loop. But I think the output is going to be a lower quality than if you find new and creative ways to use the technology and have people guiding and prompting and having humans in the loop. So I think there's a little bit of an overhype on you don't need people, and you don't the AI is just going to continue, is just going to do everything. I think what AI cannot do, and probably will never do, is run strategy, is to think of the next big, the next big idea. It can certainly be a thought partner, and it can help you think through that, but it's not going to be a fully autonomous, world anytime soon. So it's really just about elevating your people to be in the loop, to guide and use these. But we are seeing a lot of AI slop, a lot of AI content that's out there in the world, and I think we're going to see some backlash from that this year. And I think people are going to want to see real people. I think people are going to want to see a real video. They're going to want to see what that product really looks like. And I think we're going to kind of get back to that moment versus, a lot of the AI slop.
Yeah, no, I agree with you at the human in the loop. There's a lot of talk about managing AI agents as if they're employees. And, it's really sexy to say like, oh, I could code it. And it's like having 1 million employees. Very difficult to do, to manage. It's a great vision. It's the right vision. It's not where we are now. I actually really like AI for the not sexy stuff. I invest in a company called Effortless. They help you generate all the metadata about a product to help, geo optimize to be able to submitted to Amazon, to Walmart's marketplaces that all have different requirements and metadata, and it's like just a nasty data entry, data management problem that people spend a ton of time on. The stat they told me is that only 30 to 40% of marketplace submissions of SKUs actually are successful because there's so many different data validation steps that are just hard. Like, that's an unsexy, data-rich, data transformation type of thing that I think AI is really, really good at. We've talked a little bit about how AI changes the ways like teams test and personalize and optimize experiences. Like, are you finding that this is about making people more efficient and increasing speed? Are people, kind of reducing the number of humans in the loop and being able to do more with less? Where do they see the biggest efficiencies in the whole test, personalize, optimize
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely
cycle?
seeing you can, and it is controversial a bit, right? Because I just made the statement that AI is not going to completely remove humans, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to change the work, and it's not going to change your role and your org and the types of people that you need, and how you decide to organize around getting work done. So we're definitely seeing our customers look for ways to kind of get more done with the team that they have. That's another way of saying not hiring or reducing, right? And as you dig in and you look at that, it's really, you're just kind of collapsing some of the roles and responsibilities that previously you needed, these siloed people. So if you think about like a designer that needs to develop and and code a page or an experience or some output. Previously those were two people. Well, now the designers can do that, right? To your point on like prototyping gets 80% of the way there. Well, that 80% of the way there is code, right? Can be code. You no longer need to hand the design concept over to somebody to code it. You can have the designer continue to design it, come up with the concept, come up with the merchandising strategy, and the output is code. And then that gets handed off in the team. So I think you're starting to see kind of that process that I just discussed collapsing a bit. And it just means like the roles are evolving. That'll probably continue, and so everyone in the organization needs to think about how you can extend what the value that you bring, and you can extend and evolve your role. Harder to do at the frontline level, and this is where the topic of it has to start top down and encourage maybe rethinking. Maybe we can take this open headcount and it becomes two roles, right, all in one. And leverage leverage the tool and technology. But I agree with your earlier point too, which I thought was a great one. I just want to reemphasize it, is that I think AI is really, really good at kind of the unsexy stuff, right? And it gets a lot of buzz around, I think, the flashy output, but a lot of times it can just remove a lot of that mundane work. And let's not forget, AI isn't new. It's not that it's not like AI was first invented or put into the world 3 years ago. It's been around for decades. So it's now just at a point where it's more available and accessible to the average person.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's about reducing that mundane work, and to your point, if platforms like Fastr can allow you to run 3 times the number of experiments, you're really only limited to by the sample size, right, and how many experiments you can get. I mean, every person becomes more valuable because they have these tools, not less. And so as long as you can scale to whatever your inherent limitations are based upon traffic or orders or SKUs or whatever it might be, then I actually think that this unlocks productivity and makes the ROI on additional employees better. So we've talked a little bit about how this changes cultures, silos, orgs, processes, technology, fragmented technology versus full platform. What are the first practical steps retail leaders can take to increase digital velocity without having to do a full platform overhaul?
Yeah, I'm
Where
going to
would you
start with
start?
the most obvious place, and I would imagine everyone that's tuned in today is probably experiencing this, which is organic traffic as we've known it over the last decade or two with Google search, et cetera. I mean, that has changed fairly dramatically over the last several quarters, last year in particular. And I think there was an interesting stat recently. I think it was put out by Adobe Analytics that they saw during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Q4, that that the shoppers that came through AI search jumped 700%. So just stop and think about that for a second. A brand new channel has showed up, and now we have a data point. We're a couple years into this, and that channel has grown 700%. Of course, law of large numbers, but that number is going to continue to grow. So what does that really tell me?
Law of small numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think every meeting that, every customer that I meet with now is talking about how can we show up better in that channel, right? How can we be, how can we be considered, in that channel? And it's still early, and ads and ad spending hasn't come to that channel yet. Although, rumors have it that it's coming soon for ChatGPT and others. But yeah.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if you saw. I think this week, the Claude actually is releasing a Super Bowl ad, a set of Super Bowl ads making fun of ChatGPT, and it's incredible. It's hysterical.
I
it's unbelievable. If you haven't, to our listeners, yeah, you have to look at them. They're
and I think it's true, right? And so without getting into what the ad's about, definitely go watch those ads. So ads are coming, and so what are they going to look like? What are the economics? Who knows? But back to kind of organic search is still going to be a channel. And so through so with that increase in terms of traffic, all of the meetings that we've been having recently have been, how can we optimize for that channel? And so I think that's top of mind with every brand and retailer. You don't have to go too far to have that conversation. And so I think practical advice for leaders was your question. One is immediately go get yourself a visibility scorecard on your site and on your pages, right? This is something we can help with. There are other firms and out there as well. Certainly something that we offer. We'll provide a visibility scorecard for your site, and we'll come back with tangible improvements to the site, to the pages, as well as additional content and ways to be considered, in that channel. So I think that's one tangible, practical advice is think about that as a channel. Think about how do you optimize within that channel. That would be different than optimizing for ads and optimizing for Google organic search or other channels. And that leads me to the next set of tangible advice is treat each of those channels and what's required for each of those channels in terms of digital experience and interactions differently. If a shopper has just spent, an hour doing research inside of an LLM and ends up, on your site, it's obviously, a highly considered, purchase and probably somebody that can be treated differently than someone that comes in from another channel who's a little earlier in the shopping journey. So one, get yourself a visibility scorecard. We have one. There's other ways, to get these. Happy to kind of share that. And then I think the second practical advice I would leave everyone with is, go look at your Jira board of digital experiments that you want to run and question, why can't we go do more of those? Why can't we just go test these concepts today? What's standing in the way? Find those blockers and try to get those removed. We just were engaged with a very large brand and retailer in the apparel sector, and I think one of our first meetings, they had 100 items on their experimentation board that they said it would take them a year to get to. Well, a lot changes over the course of a year, so you want to find ways to really start to knock more off your list, obviously in a prioritized fashion.
Gotcha. I'm a big believer in what gets measured gets managed. With the focus on speed, is there a way that you recommend measuring speed, or how do you think about that?
I think velocity has to be, a KPI, right? How agile are we as an organization? How long does it take us to get from time to idea? How long does it take us to get from idea to live? And, finding finding those measurement points and measuring it. I agree with you. Like, output follows things, things that you manage, and obviously great strategy and great execution. And then I would also say, iterate quickly, right? So don't fall into the trap of trying to boil the ocean and doing, all 100 things on that Jira board that I mentioned. Like, just find ways to optimize and iterate, quickly. Find ways to get more launches done, and measure that. Measure how many how many experiments have we run. How well did they perform? Of course, but I think just kind of the speed and the velocity and the ability to get more done is a key KPI.
Gotcha. So I've been building SaaS products for 25 years, just like you. I joined. I graduated with a computer science degree in 1998. So I caught the first internet boom and went to an e-commerce company. And so I've been focused on the space for a long time. In SaaS products or just general in startups, there's this notion of product market fit. And there's lots of definitions that go around, but there's also kind of like this feeling that happens when you have product market fit. So for example, customers just start coming to you out of the blue. Your existing customers ask for more, make referrals, they leave good reviews. And like, we've launched a bunch of products at iGenie, and like, we just launched a new product called Impact IQ, and it's like flying off the shelves and spreading like wildfire in organizations from like seed to beyond. And so you look at that, you're like, yes, we got really good product market fit here. So if I can like bastardize that term and talk about product experience speed fit or something along those lines, what is like winning in digital retail look when that speed, that intelligence, that experience and execution are fully aligned? Who's most impacted? Who stops complaining? Like, how do the way people report things change or communicate? What happens? How do you say, yeah, I see that product experience?
I think
fit.
Winning, you just hit on it, which I loved. I think winning is just, it's like effortless, flying off the shelves. You can't keep up with demand. That feeling really says that, winning experiences, and this would apply to, e-commerce or digital. It should, it should just feel effortless. And so customers will feel that. So even if they can't really explain why, interacting with your brand was better, and they can't articulate that, they'll actually feel it. And so you want to continue to just kind of iterate on getting to that feeling where it's just effortless. Everything that you interact with a customer around is relevant and timely and personalized, and remove all of the friction that might be in the way of delivering that type of a customer experience. So,
what does that look like inside the business, inside the retailer? Like, it's the IT team who's not, is not dealing with all these complaints. It's projects being delivered ahead of time. Like, what does that look like? That cohesion look like? That winning look like internally?
Yeah, it's the merchandising team has an idea for a particular, offer that they want to bring to market and they want to promote. And, it takes them 3 to 6 weeks or 3 to 6 months to actually, take action on that. By the time they get it done, all of that friction, they may have missed their window of opportunity. So what it actually feels like is the merchandising team, or the marketing e-commerce team, they have a concept, they have an idea, they have a thesis, and they can go immediately act on it without any internal barriers in the way, which are typically those, I've got to create a ticket and I got to work with IT and they have to develop it. And then I got to get the approval, all of that, kind of, old school approach in terms of like, having this big, heavy architecture. So speed will feel easy. It'll feel like you can get more work done. And as you're getting more work done and experimenting more, that's where optimization occurs.
Yeah. Well, look, we're all in this, I think, as knowledge workers to have an idea, to have that creativity. We all get disheartened when we get caught in the bureaucracy and the cogs. And so the promise of a lot of this is to allow us to go from ideation to execution, to see the the product, the impact, and then come up with the next idea to bubble up new ideas that we hadn't even thought of, and be able to use our wisdom and judgment, that human in the loop. There's a lot here that we discussed. How do we deal with fragmentation? How do we deal with platform overhauls? How do we deal with silos? We could probably go out this for another hour, but if somebody wanted to follow up with you, how would they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can also go to getfastr.com and contact our team. Trevor, thank you. This has been a really, really good discussion, and thanks to all that tuned in.
Great, awesome, and again, that's Getfastr, GETFASTR, no E at the end. I'm Trevor Sumner. You can reach me on LinkedIn or Trevor@igenie.ai. Thank you so much, John. This was a great conversation. And if you liked this episode, please like, subscribe, follow, whether it's on YouTube or your favorite podcast network. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed this Rethink Retail webinar.
Thanks, Trevor.